It is week 10 of the 2022 college football season, and we have made it to the month of November. The month of November, I like to call it the fight to the finish. The teams that are going to be in the top four in tomorrow's initial college football playoff committee ranking look to hang on to their top four position. Teams outside of the top four, like Alabama and quite a few of the Pac-12 teams, USC, Oregon, UCLA, look to sneak into the top four. And we have teams that are not in any contention of the college football playoff. They're just looking to finish their season strong, get a nice bowl bid, and even play a potential spoiler into somebody's college football playoff and national championship hopes. And what a week we are in store for this week. We've got great matchups highlighted by Tennessee and Georgia. And the AP has Tennessee tied at second with Ohio State in their rankings. And if the committee does not put Georgia and Tennessee 1 and 2, it is a blown opportunity. And I'm going to now give you my initial college football playoff ranking before we get started with the picks here. So before we get started, here is my top 10 ranking. At number 1, I have Georgia. Number 2, I have Tennessee. So the way I see it, Tennessee and Georgia on Saturday, it's 1 versus 2. Number 3, I have Ohio State. Number 4, I have TCU. Number 5, I have Michigan. Number 6, Clemson. Number 7, Alabama. And I have the Pac-12 rounding out the top 10. Oregon at 8, USC at 9, and UCLA at 10. The difference between TCU and Michigan right now for that fourth and final spot in my ranking, TCU I feel like has had the better resume so far this season than Michigan. Michigan's best win so far this season is against Penn State. While TCU, they have strong wins over Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Kansas, who has been in the top 25 at some point this season, and Oklahoma, who has been in the top 25 at some point this season, and who knows, maybe Oklahoma's going to get back into the top 25 when this is all said and done. And Clemson at number 6, I simply find Clemson the worst undefeated team out of the 6 unbeatens. Alabama at 7, I just simply find them the best one-loss team in college football. Oregon at 8, they have the head-to-head win over UCLA, and I find them the second best one-loss team in college football. USC at 9, I just think in a head-to-head, as USC and UCLA, they will face off against each other in a couple of weeks. I just think that right now, with what I've seen so far this season, USC would have the edge over UCLA. And with Georgia being 1 and Tennessee at 2, there's really nothing that really makes me think that one's better than the other, as I really don't find it relevant, as whoever wins between the two of them on Saturday is going to be number 1 in next week's ranking. So I really didn't think it was that big of a deal. But let's get to the Week 10 college football predictions. Now I'm going to go through the picks this week faster than what I normally do. 1, because I'm not really feeling that good today. And 2, I really just want to get to Tennessee and Georgia because I know that's the reason why you're here. It's 1 versus 2 in November. You can't get anything better than that. So, first game on the docket this week, Oregon State and Washington. Now, Oregon State, they have climbed into the top 25 in the AP ranking. And their 2 losses this season are to USC and Utah. So you can't really knock them for losing to USC and Utah. In fact, they actually had USC on the ropes, which I'm sure a lot of people don't remember that because it was early on in the year. But USC had to come from behind to beat Oregon State. So this is a very underrated Beaver team. Well, Washington, Michael Penix Jr. has the Huskies 10th in scoring offense. and he is first in the FBS in passing yards. However, their defense has been shaky all season long. They're 77th in scoring defense, and they're 100th in pass defense. As much as I want to see Oregon State win because I do like parity in college football, I just gotta go with Washington here. As much as Washington's defense has been shaky all season long, especially more recently, I just gotta go with the better offense in this game. As having the leading passer in college football, with Oregon State being 67th in pass defense, they are a middle-of-the-pack type of pass defense. So I'm giving the edge to Washington in this matchup, but I would not be surprised if Oregon State really had Washington on the ropes in this game. And by the way, this game is on Friday night. I should have mentioned that in the beginning. But moving on to the next one, Syracuse and Pittsburgh, and we have the two best running backs in the ACC going at it. Sean Tucker for Syracuse, second in the ACC in rushing yards, while Pittsburgh, Israel Abanikanda, 1,086 rushing yards this season, leading the ACC and is third in the FBS. While Syracuse is on a two-game losing streak right now with losses to Clemson and Notre Dame. Against Clemson, they should have won that game, but Clemson's defense kept them in it. Syracuse was the better team for roughly 50-55 minutes of that game, but unfortunately, it was not the last 5 to 10 minutes. Syracuse's defense is allowing an average of 18.38 points per game, which is top 20 in the country. But the reason why I'm giving the edge to Pittsburgh in this matchup, one, because I just think that the Clemson defeat, with the way they looked against Notre Dame, it looked like a season breaker for them. And two, Pittsburgh is 13th in time of possession. So I am favoring the Panthers in this matchup slightly, but I do think they will get the win. Next up, we have Wake Forest and NC State, an ACC showdown. And what a difference a couple of weeks or even a couple of months makes in the college football season. When I was looking at the weekly schedules in the offseason, I looked at this matchup and I thought this has the potential of being one of the bigger games of the college football season. And now that isn't the case. As Wake Forest, they went through a lot this season. Sam Hartman had to miss time with a non-football related condition. And NC State, they lost their star quarterback Devin Leary for the year early on in the season. And Wake Forest, they absolutely got trounced by a Louisville team that I honestly had their coach on the hot seat. And in fact, maybe even still in the hot seat. Who knows? But I think that Wake Forest is going to bounce back in this game. I'm just simply basing this matchup off of the better quarterback play. As I've seen Sam Hartman these last couple of seasons, and I like what I see out of him. In fact, if he would have been able to play in the beginning of the season, he would probably be one of the front runners for the Heisman at this point. Maybe up until last week. But I am going with the Demon Deacons in this matchup as NC State. I mean, their backup quarterback has held his own when he has been called upon, but I just think Wake Forest is going to be the better team on Saturday. Clemson and Notre Dame. And again, looking at the weekly schedule in the offseason, I had this game highlighted as one of the biggest games of the season. But Notre Dame got off to a disappointing start. Lost to Ohio State in week 1, which you can't really knock them for. Ohio State's at least number 3 in my rankings, so they're a top 3, top 5 team, depending on how the committee's going to feel tomorrow night. But they lost to Marshall week 2. They started off 0-2. It was announced their starting quarterback, Tyler Bachner, would miss the rest of the season with a shoulder injury, and then Drew Pine was called upon. But ever since Drew Pine took over as the starting quarterback, Notre Dame has been a much better team. They've won 5 out of their last 6 games, including a win over North Carolina, who I would imagine is going to be in the top 25 in the committee rankings tomorrow night. As much as I have talked about Clemson's defense being one of the best defenses in the entire country, I feel like this is going to be a trap game for Clemson. I at least see it that way. As Notre Dame's defense, they've held their own this season, believe it or not. 28th in total defense, 51st in run defense, which Will Shipley is going to have a big role in this game, as he has throughout the season. I just feel like if Notre Dame can hold their own in this game from start to finish, because the longer you can last in a game, the better the chance you have of pulling off the upset. I also want to take into account DJ Uiagalelei, when he had to start in replacement to Trevor Lawrence in 2020, 439 passing yards, 2 touchdown passes in that game. Can Drew Pine make the throws against this Clemson defense? 27th total defense, 21st in scoring defense, and they have the 7th best run defense. But can Notre Dame's experienced offensive line create holes for Audric Estime? Because if they can control the pace of this game, keep Clemson's offense on the sidelines, strong chance for the Irish. Plus, I have said countless times on this channel, college football in November always brings out the chaos, and a big reason for that, teams with nothing to lose but everything to gain, and teams that have the potential of playing spoiler. And Notre Dame is one of those teams just this week, a chance to play spoiler and spoil Clemson's college football playoff hopes, as I think a one-loss Clemson team would not get into the college football playoff when it's all said and done. Now, I am going to pick Clemson in this game, but I think it's going to be a lot closer than what the experts believe. Next up, we have Texas and Kansas State, the 2 best running backs in the Big 12 going head-to-head. Bijan Robinson leads the Big 12 with 920 rushing yards, while Deuce Vaughn is just behind him at 902. And for the Longhorns, Xavier Worthy has had at least 1 touchdown in the last 5 games. And ever since Quinn Ewers came back from injury, the Texas Longhorns have looked like a completely different team. While on the other side, perhaps there is a quarterback controversy brewing in Manhattan. Will Howard was dominant in Kansas State's 48-0 win over Oklahoma State last week, as Adrian Martinez was sidelined last week with the hip injury that he suffered early on in the TCU game. So it's unknown whether Howard or Martinez will be the starting quarterback in this matchup. But I'm going to give a slight edge to Kansas State, and it is not by that much. I think this game is going to be close from start to finish. But Kansas State, despite the devastating blunder against TCU, where they had a 28-10 lead, to come out the very next week and dominate Oklahoma State 48-0, it's a big reason why Kansas State currently sits at 11th in scoring defense. And I think this game is going to come down to which team I think is going to run the football better, and I think that will be the Wildcats. And nobody really talked about the defense that much for Kansas State, but Felix Anudike-Uzomah, 7 sacks this season, 2nd in the FBS. So I think the Kansas State Wildcats, I think they win a close one. Alabama and LSU, both teams are coming off of a bye week, but before that, both teams played their best game of the season, in my opinion. Alabama played their best game against Mississippi State, had them shut out to the final play of the game. LSU, they may have been down early against Ole Miss, but they were dominant the later on that game went. The longer on it went, the more dominant they were. But I am going to pick Alabama in this game, as they are fourth in the FBS in scoring offense, averaging just over 43 points per game. They're seventh in scoring defense, only giving up an average of 16.6 points per game. And when you give Nick Saban an extra week to prepare for a big-time opponent, more often than not, it's going to result in a win. Plus, Brian Kelly has really struggled against Nick Saban in the past when he was at Notre Dame, in the couple of times they faced off in the postseason. Although last year's matchup, it did come down to the wire, I don't think this year's one will. Even though I think LSU's defense has the defense to stay in it for a long period of time, I just don't like their chances in this matchup. I'm going with the Tide. And finally, the game you're all waiting for, Tennessee and Georgia, or as I like to call it, 1 versus 2. You can't get much better than this. 1 versus 2 in the month of November. This is the most hyped regular season college football game since LSU Alabama in 2019. College football playoff implications on the line in this matchup, as I think the winner of this game, it is safe to say, is a virtual lock for the college football playoff, as the rest of the schedule for these two teams, it's pretty easily winnable after this week. And worst case scenario, whoever wins this game goes to Atlanta for the SEC championship game, loses, it's their one loss of the season. I think they'd still get in. Now, something has got to give in this matchup, as Tennessee has the best scoring offense in the FBS, averaging just under 49.5 points per game, while Georgia is second in scoring defense, only giving up an average of 10.5 points per game. Jalen Hyatt for the Volunteers, 14 touchdowns this season, receiving touchdowns, most in the NCAA. Tennessee second in passing offense, led by quarterback Hendon Hooker, and I think if he wins this game, he's going to emerge as the Heisman favorite, in my opinion, if he's not already to a lot of other people. But Georgia, I think, might be able to control the pace of this game, as they are fourth in time of possession. Now, Georgia's offense doesn't get talked about as much as their defense, but they're sixth in the FBS in scoring offense, averaging just under 42 points per game. So we could be in line for another shootout. In fact, I believe we are. Tennessee's 125th in time of possession. How will Tennessee's secondary be in this matchup? Because I think that is the determining factor. Because Tennessee is 127th in passing defense. Brock Bowers for the Bulldogs is a mismatch for anyone. Jalen Hyatt at the same time, a mismatch for anyone. As the last time Tennessee had a game against the number one team in the country, he set a school record. 200 plus receiving yards and 5 touchdowns. And I have been on the fence for the last couple of days. But winning what I feel like is the game of the year, the most hyped regular season college football game since 2019, LSU and Alabama, I have the Tennessee Volunteers winning this epic battle. Cedric Tillman came back for the Volunteers last week against Kentucky, and he is now back in that Tennessee offense, which that's going to add in more help for Jalen Hyatt. As Georgia, I believe if Tillman was not going to be in this game, they were going to do everything they can to double cover Jalen Hyatt. But now Cedric Tillman is back. That just adds another headache for the Georgia defense, as I like the Volunteers to win this game. I know that they do say offense wins you games, defense wins you championships, but this is a game. and I like Tennessee to win. And that will do it for my Week 10 college football predictions. A very big week. The month of November is going to start off with a bang. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Until next time, have a wonderful day and enjoy this epic college football Saturday this week.